compliance does not mean secure. So there's a buy consistency that you need to do both at once. And if you can have it done through a consultative piece, at least from my perspective, as I support 4,000 customers, I'm seeing it at a vast majority. So I can see a consolidated approach. Independent contributors are obviously seeing it once and it gets overwhelming. So don't be fearful to ask for help. And obviously, that's one of the reasons why we work with you so well, Nick, because, you're putting us in front of a lot of these organizations that just want that sidebar conversation that opens up a plethora of information that they never thought to consider.
Hello world. Welcome once again to Get in the Hole with Tech-Gofer. I am your host, Nick Mulholland, president of Tech-Gofer. We have a fantastic guest on today. Very excited. John Britton, VP of Engineering from SilverSky. John, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, glad to have you here. Man, we're going to have a fantastic conversation. This guy is a cybersecurity evangelist. We're going to get to exactly what that means here in a little bit. But first, as we always do, we start with what we're drinking. So John, what you got over there?
So straight after this, I'm meeting with my president. So I was going to be cracking into a Blanton's, but I think it's a bit unethical for me to do that. So with it being easy, yeah, I know you shook your shoulders. I'm going to be cracking on with a Guinness, which I pre-poured, and I did hope to try and do a split the G, but cans nowadays don't marry up to the glasses. So I'm on a Guinness today.
There you go. There you go. I picked a kind of interesting one. I've got mead from Superstition Springs Meadery, which is in Prescott, Arizona. It's globally recognized as one of the top meaderies in the world. This one is a grape and honey one. It's very good. So cheers. Thanks for being on, John.
A meadery. That's definitely a new word for me.
It's pretty sweet. Right in downtown Prescott, Arizona. Go into a pretty big shop. They've got the basement area. You've got like flights that you can do of all sorts of different flavors. And, how often do you really run into a mead-free place?
You don't. There's actually a place in Charlotte that does mead, and then I've been banned from doing it with my wife because on Father's Day she took me there and I did a flight of meads. And about 4 hours later, we're in our communal swimming pool, and I'm just conked on this floater, like completely out of it. So let's hope it doesn't hit you as hard as it hit me.
It's funny, the last time that I did that, not exactly that, but similarly, like, hey, wait a minute, that stuff will catch up with you a lot faster than beer. That's for darn sure. So,
that's right. That's right.
Excellent. Well, let's jump into it. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, you on your LinkedIn promote that you're a cybersecurity evangelist. Tell us a little about what that means to you and why you have that listed.
Yeah, so that terminology or term really sunk in with me just from obviously the role and responsibility I feel that I hold in cybersecurity, but it was influenced to me for being the fact that I'm in North Carolina, Charlotte specifically, and the evangelist of evangelists being Billy Graham. When I first moved here, we lived just around the corner from his museum. So, just being understanding of obviously how he would go out and, preach obviously his message in one aspect for what I do from cybersecurity as I moved away from operations. I've got myself into that role now where, working with you and other partners, I go to different geographics, and my role and responsibility is to help facilitating the learning around cybersecurity. And so the evangelist kind of role really stuck with me because, in essence, that's what I'm doing. I'm going around listening, learning, and obviously presenting the knowledge that I've learned from the experience that I've had and, evangelizing the best possibilities within security.
Yeah, and that's what we like about working with you is, there's different very salesy folks, but when I think evangelist, it's more of an education type thing. It's more of a getting the word out type of thing. And so we're going to get into a lot of that, on our discussion today. Why don't we start? Why don't we secondarily go into tell us about your background? Where did you start jumping into security, and how did you transition and now get to the role that you're in?
Yeah. Short story to put a long one in, but I started obviously in 2005 in England, John Britton from Britain, if you will. And I joined a specific trade within the military, being special operators. Our role then was in signals intelligence of identifying, detecting communications, going out to Afghanistan a few times, doing a lot of analytical analysis of things of that nature. So initially I wasn't anything to do with cybersecurity as we know it, but as I evolved, I got into cyber and I immigrated over to the US with my wife, and started working at Wells Fargo. I was one of the SOC analysts and very quickly found myself leading the team from an analytical perspective, and really found a grasp for understanding that it was quite easy to create security. But obviously, one of the inefficiencies for security for Wells Fargo was we're just so big. And so I started working with an organization called Rocus that was a MSSP, and we just grew and grew from there. And I built out the security operations. And in about 2020, I moved away from being a SOC manager to really falling into this consultative evangelist role that I am today. And 2.5 years ago, moved to SilverSky just because of their technical capabilities and want to actually really dictate to the industry what we should be doing. And obviously that worked in complements to my evangelist lifestyle.
Yeah. So being British Special Forces, I just finished the TV show The Day of the Jackal. Have you at all checked that out?
No, but as you can imagine, being the representative for them, everybody keeps pinging me. So it's on my to watch list. And I guess my question would be, as I'm flying, is it airport or, sorry, more specifically, airliner friendly? So I don't want, blood and guts, or is it a good one to watch?
It's funny you mentioned that because I would say for the most part it is. There's definitely some sniper shots to get through. I made an error when I was flying on a flight from Johannesburg to Cape Town, South Africa, and decided to watch a Dexter episode. It was either Dexter or Hannibal, and the guy next to me definitely was very curious as to what in the world I was watching. So, but yeah,
I had that with John Wick. I had that with John Wick. I was like,
yeah,
you can't be watching this. I was like, oh yeah, my bad.
yeah, exactly. All right, so back to our main topic here. So, I'd like to start with you kind of talking high level about cybersecurity, what you're kind of seeing, and then we'll kind of delve a little bit into more of the SilverSky offering and stuff. But high level, what are some of the biggest cybersecurity threats that you're seeing within companies that they're not properly managed and ready to deal with? Is it tell us about some maybe the unknown vulnerabilities or immature practices that they have.
And that's it. The starting point is the unknown vulnerabilities that exist in the environment. A lot of statistics and reports have come out this year that 2-3 years ago we'll talk about phishing, social engineering. But for the most part now, a lot of organizations are hosting vulnerabilities that they're not aware of. And, the hacking organizations are proactively looking for these. And the real mindset into that, to complement your second piece of their immature processes, is, they look at vulnerabilities from how they've been established and the fact that you have a scoring mechanism, a CVE or CVSS, that identifies the scoring of it, and just to the layman's term, the critical vulnerabilities that exist in my environment. And the immature aspects of this is companies see them and go, oh, I need to really jump on these and fix them if they've got a practice to identify them. But the unfortunate factor of that, and that's a very simple program, is they look at the critical and they go after the critical, but it's the mediums and lows that are actually exploiting the organizations in themselves. So, there's an evolution of thought within regards to that, where just because you have a vulnerability does not mean it's exploitable. And so as you can get this equilibrium of understanding, the biggest thing in security to mature that approach to remove the vulnerabilities is to really, how do you manage the time effectively and have a multi-depth approach to understanding your vulnerabilities in your environment. And that's one of the things that we try to do quite heavily is, it might be critical, but your mediums are actually accessible to the internet and have A, B, and C that needs to be in place to be exploitable. So actually, that's your biggest threat in your environment. And so, we tend to see that type of activity, which is the fear of the unknown, and people unfortunately going at it thinking they're doing a good job about it, but really falling flat on the face because they're concentrating on things that do look more severe, but it's that small little thing in the environment that's actually the thing that's compromising them.
AI, obviously a buzzword. We've talked about it a whole bunch. I like what you were talking about because when we get asked for pen tests, depending on the provider, it's the red light, yellow light, green light, right? These are, you need to focus on these. These ones are, afterwards. The green ones are, yeah, it's a problem, but it could be fixed. Where do you see AI the AIs that SilverSky might be using are out, others. Where are they really focused on? Are they focused on that low hanging fruit type of stuff, or are they really more focused on the urgent, the red level type problems?
Yeah. So one of the platforms that we use, it has, automation to the foundation of AI, and the functions for that is exactly that. You take the CV, you understand the vulnerability, but you also understand the requirements that need to be in place for that exploitable, that vulnerability to be exploited. So there's automation on that that allows it to say, well, vulnerability exists. Does B, C, and D exist to allow that to be exploited? And then furthermore, they're then utilizing a lot of like dark web references to see, are actual people creating an exploit to be able to take that attack down? And then furthermore, are we seeing traffic in the environment to do that? So, it's a little bit of a correlation of data together just to bring forward a more amicable reference scoring chart. And, it's not necessarily AI in terms of a generative perspective, but it's definitely AI in the fact that it's automating the correlation of multiple factors to output something that's a little bit more meaningful. And in the foundation, that's really what security operations is how can I present to you something that's actually more, time worthy and worthy of your effort to look into. And that's where we see a lot of AI, which is a very sensitive terminology, especially in my arena, because of the attention it's taken away from the traditional format of what AI was.
Yeah. So I know that for all the listeners and viewers that are out there in their IT leadership roles, they have all the budgets in the world that they can just buy anything and everything. Kidding.
Absolutely, they do.
Yeah. So I'm curious what your thought is. I mean, in multiple customers that you support, engagements that you have, people that you talk to, what is what's the best direction you could give to someone that is being asked to do more with less? And that could be budget, it could be people, what are, and it could be SilverSky, it could be more of a, high level, but what could you recommend that folks are doing to be better security prepared?
Yeah. So over the years, trying to find that biting point that the business is going to invest into has been definitely difficult. Corona helped with a aspect of people had to work from home, so there was a technology evolution that inadvertently came with better security. But as we find ourselves today, you're right. I want more security, but I want to spend less, and I want to be able to read the return on investment. And so that's one of the strategies that we've come out with quite heavily in our organizations. How can we meet the customer where they're at? And as organizations have evolved their technology, the problem that they're doing is they're not necessarily understanding the whole breadth of the availability of products and or services. And one of the things that I really like to say is, bad technology configured well will always supersede good technology configured poorly. And ultimately, that is a complement of the technology you got today is probably adequate for you, but do you have the practices around it to be able to develop them? And so we try to meet organizations of where they're at, and we tend to run into, as an example, organizations from a compute, a collaborative workspace, and AI perspective have invested into Microsoft to a higher level that actually brings forward a lot of security capabilities that I don't know, like 5 years ago, we would never say that Microsoft was a security provider. They're just an enabler for communications. And so we've started to navigate with customers of like, well, you're paying for the Defender Suite and Sentinel that is pretty damn good when configured well, but you're also over here paying for CrowdStrike and Proofpoint. These are duplicative costs that are pretty dope in terms of practices, but if you want to reduce your spend and improve your approach, that's one way you can do that. But then the other way is, how are you talking to the business to get board of directors, CFO buy-in? And it's not unfortunately selling security to improve the business, but it's more maybe aligning with the business objectives of is cybersecurity insurance up and we need to renew and get better quotes? Or are we as a business under the gun for compliance? And meeting insurance and being compliant doesn't necessarily mean that you're secure, but there's a lot of elements that we can use in that to build the justification to invest more into practices that we as a security practitioner want to. But rather than it for security sakes, we're doing it from compliance sakes because that relates to business initiatives and maybe the reason why they're able to operate in the domain they do. And therefore, if they're not meeting them standards, you're putting a lot of business revenue at risk. And so there's a lot in there, to take into account. And so, with that, we're coming in all of our sales engagements. The first thing is an assessment of the business of prescriptively, where should you be in the next 6, 12 months? And, looking at it objectively, the last 5 years of you doing things doesn't necessarily mean that's the way we should be doing the next 5 years because of the shift and change in things. And all of it falls down to, I want to do more and spend less and probably add AI to my business.
Yeah, and I mean, in most of the engagements for cybersecurity, it's every company is at a different level, right? I mean, some make it a priority, some don't. So you want to talk a little bit about how you in your role, and you can include or go a little bit deep as far as SilverSky as a company. How are you guys meeting customers where they're at in their own journey, right?
Yep. Yeah. So interestingly enough, we're putting ourselves first. As a sales organization, that's not necessarily what you want to say. And I'll probably have people disagree in my organization on that terminology, but the functionality of it is if you're partnering with us, you're trying to get an organization that's very well established, understands what they're doing, and when they put their first foot into your business, are very well established of what they're doing. And what that means is, we're operational and savvy in security operations. Now, to meet the customer, we might speak to one company that works in, manufacturing, and they do A, and I meet another company in manufacturing that also does A, but their businesses are completely built differently and they're utilizing different technologies. So one of the elements that we're trying to do, or what we do quite well, is we have an agnostic approach to security technology. So a firewall is a firewall. Realistically, the data it's providing is always going to be the same unless it's, a lesser brand that's not a commercially operational one, and we'll talk about that. But it gives the customer the ease to meet us of wherever they're at. We can then provide immediate guidance on the data that we're seeing, if there's better performance is needed, and start building, better processes and things of that nature. But ultimately, they're inheriting our established operations to create that equilibrium and partnership where we're providing them a transparent, always available understanding of the risk to their business and how collectively together we are performing. And obviously, to do that, that means we've got to kind of lead with, certain types of technologies and capabilities that need to be put into the business. But it's done in a way that is going to be beneficial for both organizations because, why wouldn't you want that? You would not want to sign a contract with SilverSky if you're saying, I'm not going to do half this stuff, but I still want you to perform well. It's just not a song sheet that's going to be successful. So we are very prescriptive and, not necessarily forthcoming, but we are adaptive on a strategy to ensure, okay, maybe we can't meet the gold standard by tomorrow, but in 6 months we could be there. And so therefore it's a very adaptive approach to evolve security over time.
Yeah, and security as I've mentioned multiple times on the show, I'm in some entrepreneur groups. I'm with business owners. Typically, they hate technology. They just want to focus on what they do, whether it's particular service or widgets or what have you. And like I hate healthcare. I think it's just extremely complex. I never want to look at the plans. And I feel most entrepreneurs and business owners and C-level board folks, they don't know. I mean, cybersecurity, it's a very complex, it's a very confusing. Things are changing all the time. And a lot of companies that are out there, certainly that, ones that we displace, they're not very forthcoming with what they're finding, how they're going to fix the problem. They're just saying, well, you have a problem and this is what it's going to cost to fix it without kind of giving those steps. Bring that up because, one of SilverSky's core beliefs is transparency. So how do you live that core value while playing in the cybersecurity secretive, kind of space?
Yeah, it's hard because, the unfortunate factor for business and industries, cybersecurity is a money shop. And a lot of the providers out there, they're doing a fantastic job of making a lot of money. And, that's great. But the function of it and the transparency piece of it is, we've got to be transparent at every level. We are not going to be able to understand the business better than the company. And we also have to give them that warm, fuzzy feeling that they know what we're doing. So transparently, they can access their console in which we operate from and see exactly what we're doing. And the function of that is to create an equilibrium of bidirectional accountability. It's our job to operationalize and monitor and manage things. We're a security organization. We understand how that works. But we're not always going to be capable of saying, hey, we found this vulnerability. you're the IT guys, you need to go ahead and patch it. In the interim, we'll do our job. But if we're not being transparent enough to show them that we're doing our job, we can't keep them accountable when they're not reducing the risks in their environment. And the unfortunate fact is, put my company first. A hospital gets hacked, and we're doing a small piece of it. Their brand is in the is in the news. So is mine, regardless of how much or how little we're doing and how much we told them. So we've got to be very careful on that, and that's why being transparent. I want a company not to have to call me and say, "Can you send me a report of what you're doing?" They can log in and see what we're doing. And quite frankly, if we're not doing enough, because they spotted something before us, great. We're working with a lot of companies, and things that might look benign to us, to them might actually be something a little bit more sensitive. So having that open approach enables them to really get that warm, fuzzy feeling from us as a service delivery, because the irony behind a service provider, the best relationship is when you don't hear from your security company. And so obviously, we've got to create that equilibrium where we're not going to be touching them every 2 seconds. That's not cost prohibitive. But if we've got that transparent approach that can get to us, they can at least see what we're doing. And then when we do casually meet with them monthly, quarterly, however they are asking for, it complements the service that we're offering.
So I feel like we could talk for much longer, but we are kind of bumping up on time. I wanted to ask, as the cybersecurity evangelist, what's next? What do you see on the horizon? I mean, I wouldn't expect you to answer that with, well, hackers are going to plan on doing this by any means, but from it could be SilverSky related, or it could be just the industry as a whole. Where do you see cybersecurity in the next 3 to even 5 years with AI and all these crazy quantum computing things that I'm seeing in the news and what have you?
Right, quantum computing. I think AI is going to muddle it up a little bit. A quick snapshot into that is, Gartner put out how, out of all the CISOs that they spoke to, they're going to be wanting to add AI into their businesses. But at the same time, they said that, only 10% of the companies that they spoke to were going to increase their budgets. So I think what we're going to end up doing is creating more complexity around how we're coming to the table from a security perspective. I'm hoping that there's going to be consolidation in terms of it makes it easier to understand what we should be doing. But really, compliance is going to be one that's going to hurt organizations, regardless of security. And the hacks that we're seeing, we're starting to see a lot more government-led fines coming out from 2001 now, and a lot more regulations that have a lot more backing and oomph from them, from the government and from local state government factors that are pushing on different organizations. And as we start saying, as you allude to, HIPAA, hospitals and things of that nature, they're up here in terms of organizations, but now the lower shops are also being hit quite heavy. And so, I think there's going to be a consolidation in terms of the efforts that need to happen. And as we used to say back in 2018 and 17, there is a deficit of security providers. It's great for organizations like mine, but this is one where now, organizations really need to get ahead of it and really understand where they're at and start developing their plans to work in accordance of where the government's going to put them. And that has nothing to do with the evolutions that hackers are going to do with the ChatGPT functions of phishing emails and things of that nature. But, the hackers is one thing, is a bit more consistent. The government's one of these ones where overnight they could dictate and change. And all of a sudden you've got a fine on your front door and they don't care. And so this is one where maturity is going to be key. And I might have said it earlier, but I'll leave with it. Compliance does not mean secure. So there's a consistency that you need to do both at once. And if you can have it done through a consultative piece, at least from my perspective, as I support 4,000 customers, I'm seeing it at a vast majority. So I can see a consolidated approach. Independent contributors are obviously seeing it once and it gets overwhelming. So don't be fearful to ask for help. And obviously, that's one of the reasons why we work with you so well, Nick, because, you're putting us in front of a lot of these organizations that just want that sidebar conversation that opens up a plethora of information that they never thought to consider. And, right. It's one of the reasons why we love working here.
Yeah, appreciate that very much. And I love what you said. Compliance doesn't mean secure. I mean, look, the U.S. government spends Lord knows how much on security, and they're getting hammered by North Korea, China, and whatnot every single day. So yeah, that's quite an interesting take. So I appreciate that. Before we go, we typically and always talk about something golf related. So have kind of a little bit of an interesting question. What is the funniest or strangest golf ball you've ever seen?
PC.
I have an answer
Yeah,
that's also not PC.
yeah. Do you know, it's funny, not necessarily that I've seen one, and obviously I'll keep it fresh on that, but I've seen a lot now where you've got them predetermined tensors for markers that can be quite, non-PC. But I've actually, so obviously when I was in the Special Forces or United Kingdom Special Forces, they had some Hereford Pilgrim balls, and Pilgrim was the logo for we is what we did. So that's always been my favorite one. I'm on my last one. So I don't use it because I can't
Right?
exactly just
Oh
run
yeah.
up to go get another one. But yeah, that's probably been my favorite. But I keep it safe for some of the
Yeah.
ones that I have seen.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, there's a guy at my club that he has on his balls. It found return to him for a free shot, and he has sure enough given a lot of people free shots. I took that idea and I made it very dirty for Christmas one year to a few key friends, where it was free hug, free this,
Mm.
return to said person. So
I,
that's my favorite.
I probably should see if I can get the business to buy it off on like 10% off next contract for security, but the amount of balls I lose
Right.
won't be good for the marketing.
I was going to say, yeah, SilverSky would maybe make it a problem.
Indeed.
Excellent. Well, again, John Britton, appreciate you very much being on. For those of you that, again, if you have questions, if you'd like to engage with John, please reach out to Tech-Gofer. As far as the podcast goes, obviously like, subscribe, share with anybody you think would benefit. And we will see you next time on Get in the Hole. John, thanks again.
Thank you, Nick.
Cheers.